Hey, so far camping's been a lot of fun, and I thought that tonight we could do a little bit more reading. Except, let's not do a scary story tonight. You know, before I left, I downloaded a few different books to my Kindle using the Hoopla app. And since I am a big Percy Jackson fan, there were a few books that I kind of wanted to check out. So, Rick Riordan, Percy's author, he presents other book series by different authors that deal with other mythology systems other than Greek mythology. And so there's this one book here. Let me show you. It's called Eru Shah and the End of Time by Roshani Chokshi? Don't know if I'm saying that right. But here's the book cover. And so this book uses the Hindu mythology as its setting. So why don't we try out the first chapter and see what we think? So while I'm getting to the first chapter, I need to scroll through all these pages. Why don't you get your sleeping bag? And I think I'm going to get in my sleeping bag too. And let's turn out the light and prepare to read the first chapter together. All right. Let's get cozy. All right. Chapter 1, in which Eru regrets opening the door. The problem with growing up around highly dangerous things is that after a while, you just get used to them. For as long as she could remember, Eru had lived in the Museum of Ancient Indian Art and Culture, and she knew full well that the lamp at the end of the Hall of the Gods was not to be touched. She could mention the Lamp of Destruction the way a pirate who had tamed a sea monster could casually say, "Oh, you mean old Ralph here." But even though she was used to the lamp, she had never once lit it. That would be against the rules. The rules she went over every Saturday when she led the afternoon visitors tour. Some folks may not like the idea of working on a weekend, but it never felt like work to Eru. It felt like a ceremony, like a secret. She would don her crisp scarlet vest with its 3 honeybee buttons. She would imitate her mother's museum curator voice, and people, this was the best part of all, would listen. Their eyes never left her face, especially when she talked about the cursed lamp. Sometimes she thought it was the most fascinating thing she ever discussed. A cursed lamp is a much more interesting topic than, say, a visit to the dentist, although one could argue that both are cursed. Eru had lived at the museum for so long, it kept no secrets from her. She had grown up reading and doing her homework beneath the giant stone elephant at the entrance. Often, she'd fallen asleep in the theater and wake up just before the crackling self-guided tour recording announced that India became independent from the British in 1947. She even regularly hid a stash of candy in the mouth of a 400-year-old sea dragon statue. She'd named it Steve, in the West Wing. Eru knew everything about everything in the museum, except one thing, the lamp. For the most part, it remained a mystery. "It's not quite a lamp," her mother, renowned curator and archaeologist Dr. K.P. Shah, had told her the first time she showed it to Eru. "We call it a diya." Eru remembered pressing her nose against the glass case, staring at the lump of clay. As far as cursed objects went, this was by far the most boring. It was shaped like a pinched hockey puck. Small markings like bite marks crimped the edges. And yet, for all its normalness, even the statues filling the Hall of the Gods seemed to lean away from the lamp, giving it a wide berth. "Why can't we light it?" she asked her mother. Her mother hadn't met her gaze. "Sometimes light illuminates things that are better left in the dark. Besides, you never know who is watching." Well, Eru had watched. She'd been watching her entire life. Every day after school, she would come home, hang her backpack from the stone elephant's trunk, and creep toward the Hall of the Gods. It was the museum's most popular exhibit, filled with 100 statues of various Hindu gods. Her mother had lined the walls with tall mirrors so visitors could see the artifacts from all angles. The mirrors were vintage, a word Eru had used when she traded Burton Prater a greenish penny for a whopping $2 and half a Twix bar. Because of the tall crepe myrtles and elms standing outside the windows, the light that filtered into the Hall of the Gods always looked a little muted, feathered almost, as if the statues were wearing crowns of light. Eru would stand at the entrance, her gaze resting on her favorite statues. Lord Indra, the king of the heavens, wielding a thunderbolt. Lord Krishna, playing his flutes. The Buddha, sitting with his spine straight and legs folded in meditation, before her eyes would inevitably be drawn to the Diya in the glass case. She would stand there for minutes waiting for something, anything that would make the next day at school more interesting, or make people notice that she, Eru Shah, wasn't just another 7th grader slouching through middle school, but someone extraordinary. Eru was waiting for magic, and every day she was disappointed. "Do something," she whispered to the god statues. It was a Monday morning and she was still in her pajamas. "You've got plenty of time to do something awesome, because I'm on autumn break." The statues did nothing. Eru shrugged and looked out the window. The trees of Atlanta, Georgia, hadn't yet realized it was October. Only their top halves had taken on a scarlet and golden hue, as if someone had dunked them halfway in a bucket of fire and then plopped them back on the lawn. As Eru had expected, the day was on its way to being uneventful. That should have been her first warning. The world has a tendency to trick people. It likes to make a day feel as bright and lazy as sun-warmed honey dripping down a jar as it waits until your guard is down, and that is when it strikes. Moments before the visitor alarm rang, Eru's mom had been gliding through the cramped 2-bedroom apartment connected to the museum. She seemed to be reading 3 books at a time, while also conversing on the phone in a language that sounded like a chorus of tiny bells. Eru, on the other hand, was lying upside down on the couch and pelting pieces of popcorn at her, trying to get her attention. "Mom, don't say anything if you can take me to the movies." Her mother laughed gracefully into the phone. Eru scowled. Why couldn't she laugh like that? When Eru laughed, she sounded like she was choking on air. "Mom, don't say anything if we can get a dog. A Great Pyrenees. We can name him Beowulf." Now her mother was nodding with her eyes closed, which meant that she was sincerely paying attention, just not to Eru. "Mom, don't say anything if..." "Breep, breep, breep." Her mother lifted a delicate eyebrow and stared at Eru. "You know what to do." Eru did know what to do. She just didn't want to do it. She rolled off the couch and Spider-Man crawled across the floor in one last bid to get her mother's attention. This was a difficult feat considering that the floor was littered with books and half-empty chai mugs. She looked back to see her mom jotting something on a notepad. Slouching, Eru opened the door and headed to the stairs. Monday afternoons at the museum were quiet. Even Sherilyn, the head of museum security, and Eru's long-suffering babysitter on the weekends, didn't come in on Mondays. Any other day, except Sunday when the museum was closed, Eru would help hand out visitor stickers. She would direct people to the various exhibits and point out where the bathrooms were. Once, she'd even had the opportunity to yell at someone when they'd patted the stone elephant, which had a very distinct "Do Not Touch" sign. In Eru's mind, this applied to everyone who wasn't her. On Mondays, she had come to expect occasional visitors seeking temporary shelter from bad weather, or people who wanted to express their concern, in the gentlest possible way, that the Museum of Ancient Indian Art and Culture honored the devil, or sometimes just the FedEx man needing a signature for a package. What she did not expect when she opened the door to greet the new visitors was that they would be 3 students from Augustus Day School. Eru experienced one of those elevator stopping too fast sensations. A low whoosh of panic hit her stomach as the 3 students stared down at her. and her Spider-Man pajamas. The first, Poppy Lopez, crossed her tan, freckled arms. Her brown hair was pulled back in a ballerina bun. The second, Burton Prater, held out his hand where an ugly penny sat in his palm. Burton was short and pale, and his striped black and yellow shirt made him look like an unfortunate bumblebee. The third, Ariel Reddy, the prettiest girl in their class, with her dark brown skin and shiny black hair, simply glared. "I knew it," said Poppy triumphantly. "You told everyone in math class that your mom was taking you to France for break." That's what Mom had promised, Eru thought. Last summer, Eru's mother had curled up on the couch, exhausted from another trip overseas. Right before she fell asleep, she had squeezed Eru's shoulder and said, "Perhaps I'll take you to Paris in the fall, Eru. There's a cafe along the Seine River where you can hear the stars come out before they dance in the night sky. We'll go to the boulangeries and museums, sip coffee from tiny cups, and spend hours in the gardens." That night, Eru had stayed awake dreaming of narrow winding streets and gardens so fancy that even their flowers looked haughty. With a promise in mind, Eru had cleaned her room and washed the dishes without complaint. And at school, the promise had become her armor. All the other students at Augustus Day School had vacation homes in places like the Maldives or Provence, and they complained when their yachts were under repair. The promise of Paris had brought Eru one tiny step closer to belonging. Now Eru tried not to shrink under Poppy's blue-eyed gaze. "My mom had a top-secret mission with the museum. She couldn't take me." That was partly true. Her mom never took her on work trips. Burton threw down the green penny. "You cheated me! I gave you $2. "And you got a vintage penny," started Eru. Ariel cut her off. "We know you're lying, Eru Shaw. That's what you are, a liar. And when we go back to school, we're gonna tell everyone." Eru's insides squished. When she started at Augustus Day School last month, she'd been hopeful, but that had been short-lived. Unlike the other students, she didn't get driven to school in a sleek black car. She didn't have a home offshore. She didn't have a study room or a sunroom, just a room. And even she knew that her room was really more like a closet with delusions of grandeur. But what she did have was imagination. Eru had been daydreaming her whole life. Every weekend, while she waited for her mom to come home, she would concoct a story. Her mother was a spy, an ousted princess, a sorceress. Her mom claimed she never wanted to go on business trips, but they were a necessity to keep the museum running. And when she came home and forgot about things, like Eru's chess games or choir practice, it wasn't because she didn't care, but because she was too busy juggling the state of war and peace and art. So at Augustus Day School, whenever the other kids asked, Eru told tales, like the ones she told herself. She talked about cities she'd never visited and meals she'd never eaten. If she arrived with scuffed up shoes, it was because her old pair had been sent to Italy for repair. She'd mastered that delicate, condescending eyebrow everyone else had, and she deliberately mispronounced the names of stores where she bought her clothes, like the French Target and the German Walmart. If that failed, she'd just sniff and say, "Trust me, you wouldn't recognize the brand." And in this way, she had fit in. For a while, the lies had worked. She'd even been invited to spend a weekend at the lake with Poppy and Ariel. But Eru had ruined everything the day she was caught sneaking from the carpool line. Ariel had asked which car was hers. Eru pointed at one and Ariel smiled, turned thin. "That's funny, because that's my driver's car." Ariel was giving Eru that same sneer now. "You told us you had an elephant," said Poppy. Eru pointed at the stone elephant behind her. "I do." "You said that you rescued it from India." "Well, Mom said it was salvaged from a temple, which is fancy talk for rescue." "And you said you had a cursed lamp," said Ariel. Eru saw the red light on Burton's phone, steady and unblinking. He was recording her. She panicked. What if the video went online? She had two possible choices. One, she could hope the universe might take pity on her and allow her to burst into flames before homeroom. Or two, she could change her name, grow a beard, and move away. Or, to avoid the situation entirely, she could show them something impossible. "The cursed lamp is real," she said, "and I can prove it." Well, that's the end of chapter 1. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty excited to see what happens to Eru and those 3 kids from her school, and what happens with that cursed lamp. And if you're interested too, you can go to Hoopla right now and download Erusha and the End of Time. And if you don't have the Hoopla app yet, you can go to your Apple Store or Google Play or wherever you get your apps and download it to whatever device you have, whether it's a Kindle or an iPhone or an iPod. And you can read this book right away. That's the great thing about Hoopla. There's no waiting. If they have the book, you can download it right away and get to reading. So I hope you enjoyed Erusha and the End of Time. I hope you enjoyed more Tales from the Tent, and I will see you next time.